Oh, and Annie, I realize I have the date wrong because today is the 16th. So if you want to change that first slide, thanks.
Yep. So you just want to say next when you want me to go to the next slide?
And Annie, do you want me to start after Thomas introduces us?
Yeah, do you want to lead the prayer? Here's the prayer. You can just lead it.
Sure, that's perfect.
My sister has been sending daily family prayer emails, but it's been great because I just steal them every day for my webinar of the day.
There you go.
Nice. We're going to go ahead and start letting participants in right now. So we'll give them a few minutes to fill in the spots, and I will begin at 12:45. So welcome to everyone who is joining us right now. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin at 12:45, so just about another 2 minutes or so. In the meantime, why don't you go ahead and put where you're from in the chat. I see, oh, Chris. Hi, Chris, how are you doing? It's good to see you. Well, I can't see you, but you know. Right, wait about another minute. Looks like we have people from all over. I'm seeing New York, Virginia, Texas, New Jersey, Delaware. Ah, Guam. Hello, Guam. That's awesome. It's got Baltimore, Arkansas, Lincoln, Nebraska, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Ohio. Great. Evansville, Indiana, Wisconsin, Nashville, Tennessee. Well, welcome to everyone as you continue to come into the room. My name is Thomas Pigg. I am with NCA and I will be your host today. I am going to go over a few housekeeping items before I introduce our presenters. So this webcast is going to be recorded today. So the recording will be live on our website within a few days, probably 24 to 48 hours. In the meantime, while you're listening to this and visiting our website, you can go ahead and look at our other on-demand sessions that we have there. There's been, I think, close to 45 or 50 sessions that we have done either live or on demand. So we're excited to share that with all of you, and it's all free for you. So please look at our NCA virtual digital attendee site. Now, due to a high volume of attendees that we get in these webinars, we are muting everyone's microphones and disabling your cameras. So I'm sorry that we can't see your beautiful faces or hear your voices, but we're appreciative that you're here with us today. You can interact with each other in the chat function, which many of you are already doing. Please be mindful to identify if you want to chat to just the panelists or to all. Also, if you do have questions for our presenters today, we have a Q&A box at the bottom. You can put your questions in there, and towards the end of our time together, we'll go through and we'll read some of those questions off and have them answered. We do not have the slides available for you right now, but maybe we'll be able to have them available after this if you would like them. Now, if you do want your certificate of attendance, we will be putting a bit.ly link in the chat later. There is an evaluation that goes along with this session, so fill out that evaluation and you'll be able to download your certificate of attendance. Some other things that you may be looking forward to, we have had some digital, maybe virtual book signings going on. So if you're interested in that, please go to nca.org/store, look at our bookstore. You can use the coupon code NCA virtual, and that gives you a bit of a discount. And over the last few days and continuing today into tomorrow, we have had opportunities for prizes, games, and interaction on social media. So if you're already not doing so, you can follow us on Twitter at NCA Talk or search the hashtag NCA Virtual 2020. Now, with all that being said, let me go ahead and introduce our presenters for today. First, we have Andrew Miller, and Andrew Miller's research and teaching focus on the way teaching focuses on the ways the Catholic schools and Catholic school leaders inspired by Catholic school social teaching provide a transformative and social just education for the students who attend America's Catholic schools. From his early career teaching at St. George's Catholic School in Fort Worth, Texas, to his time working as Director of Academics at the Archdiocese of Boston Catholic Schools Office, Andrew has been committed to enhancing the quality of teaching, learning, and leadership in Catholic schools. Alongside him, we have Annie Smith, who is the Associate Superintendent of Strategy, Research, and Data at the Archdiocese of Boston. Previously, she worked in a charter school and was an actuary. She graduated from the College of the Holy Cross and has her Master of Education from Harvard. So got a little jumble there, but obviously you two are very well qualified. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and hand it over to you so you can go on with your presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas. Annie and I are so happy to be with you today and hope that everyone is doing well amid these very trying times, but know that we're all here with you. If we could begin today with this brief prayer, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. We pray, good Lord, keep us under the shadow of your mercy in this time of uncertainty and distress. Sustain and support the anxious and fearful, and lift up all who are brought low, that we may rejoice in your comfort, knowing that nothing can separate us from your love. In your name we pray, amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. All right, so today we're talking about dashboards and continuous improvement. And to start this conversation, I think a lot of times when we dig in to this thing, it's good to ground ourselves in a little bit of theory before jumping straight into the practice. I know it feels kind of like the vegetable before the dessert, but let's talk a little bit about the theory of continuous improvement and how it can, help us with the work that we do in Catholic schools. So if we're going to talk continuous improvement, we first have to talk school quality. And that means we have to ask ourselves, what do we know right now about our schools, our school systems, our coordinations? What should we be doing given what we know now? And what do we honestly have the capacity to do? And in order to answer those three big questions, we have to truly ask ourselves, do we have the right information? So if we're going to figure out what are we doing or what should we be doing, we need to know if we have the right information. Annie, next, please. So one place that you can go to figure out what is school quality in a Catholic school is the national standards and benchmarks. You can go to the NSBECS and say, okay, the NSBECS give us this sense of what continuous improvement should be like. And we're called, the NSBECS remind us, by Catholic social teaching to do the work of excellent education. As they say in their defining characteristics section, that we are distinguished by excellence. Church documents, history, and practices supported by canon law establish that first and foremost, a Catholic school is characterized by excellence. This idea of excellence is rooted in what U.S. Catholic schooling has been. We can all see examples of this excellence throughout time, throughout the hundreds of years of histories that we've got doing Catholic education in the U.S., but what that looks like on a local level needs some parsing out because we are now in a different position than we've been in. So the NSBECS tell us we have to be excellent, but how do we do that? Next slide, please. Well, I want to shift gears away from just the Catholic sector now to talk about educational change frameworks that can help us make sense of this. So John Mehta and Sarah Fine, who are researchers based out of Harvard, wrote this great study of multiple different schools pursuing deeper learning initiatives. And the purpose behind their work was as follows, that students now live in a world plagued by complex global problems, including climate change, massive economic inequality, ideological warfare, and technological revolution, marked by a chaotic proliferation of sources of opinion, fact, myth, paranoia, and disinformation. And I think even more so now in this global pandemic that we're facing together, trying to find moments to affirm human dignity and build solidarity, we've got to face the fact that students live amidst this complexity and students live amid this uncertainty and are facing these realities. So it's even harder, given this complexity and uncertainty that we face, to figure out what school quality should look like. But there are ways that Catholic education is uniquely poised to address these concepts. We can't just assume that we're doing it already. It's not something that we can just assume is going to happen because the schools happen to be Catholic schools, despite the track record of success that Catholic schools have. We've got to figure out where the Catholic school advantage as an effect, not just as a given fact, can take place and can take root. So we know that students are facing uncertainty and complexity. We know that Catholic schools are, in theory, poised to do this work. But what do we do about it? And how do we get back to the mission of being rooted in excellence, which the NSBECS are calling us to do? Next slide, please. Well, another educational change framework that is less on the diagnosis of what students are dealing with and more on the prognosis about what should we do going forward is from a colleague of mine at Boston College, Dr. Dennis Shirley, and he writes about the new imperatives of educational change. And he says that ultimately what we've got to do is get to a place of high achievement and high integrity. And this, I think, aligns with how we do work intentionally, right? We know as Catholic educators, we have to be mission driven, but how do we become intentionally mission driven in our work? How do we get to this place of high achievement and high integrity? Well, Dennis says in his work that educators activate themselves to take charge of teaching and learning and do so in a climate of shared moral purpose. In the Catholic sector, we've got that. We've got our shared moral purpose. We come together knowing our mission, knowing our identity. And so many schools over the past 15, 20 years have done such a good job in the Catholic sector of identifying their mission, rooting it in gospel truths and values, and making sure that it's lived out. And then, though I would say that we do see miracles in our Catholic schools, Dennis says there are no miracles here. And while allies from higher education are valued, the real action happens in the school on a daily basis. The reason I bring up this quote from Dennis is that we've got to appreciate what's going on a daily basis, the hard work that it takes. We can't just accept that the Catholic school advantage is going to be a given. We have to figure out how to make it a true lived effect. And the only way to make it a true lived effect is to start to unpack what school quality should look like, what we should be doing, and collect the right information to figure this stuff out. Next slide, please. So, what we have to do in order to collect data to work on continuous improvement is figure out where continuous improvement is needed. One of the things that people within the continuous improvement science area always talk about is cycles of plan, do, study, act. I have some hesitations about plan, do, study, act. And I think that one of the things that Andy and I will show today is it's more complex than that. You can't just say plan, do, study, act and assume that there's going to be a linear improvement. You can't just say plan, do, study, act and assume that things are going to get better, because what better looks like for you in your school, which might be a parish school, is going to look very different from your school, your Catholic school neighbors next door who might be in a consortium model. So what you've got to figure out, it's much more on the Jesuit Ignatian pedagogical paradigm side of things. And my time at BC and Annie's at College of the Holy Cross, we've definitely informed by those Jesuit values. About looking at the context, thinking about our experiences, reflecting on those things before we even get to action and evaluation. So this model of figuring out where our context, our experiences are before we can even get to the planning, studying, doing, etc., is very important. And I think rooted in our Catholic call, continuous improvement is about knowing our context, knowing what we're currently doing so that we can then get to the doing later on. So instructional level questions that we should be asking ourselves when it comes to continuous improvement: what actually is the teaching and learning culture of our school? Not what do we want it to be, what is it? What does it look like? Who's involved in it? And then once we figure out that context, focus on those experiences, we get to the reflection piece. What do we want it to do? At the organization level, in order to define school quality, to focus on continuous improvement, we should ask ourselves, what are the leadership structures we have right now? How are we going to accomplish our goals given what our current capacities are? And then context and experience being decided, reflecting what do we want our leadership models to be doing. And then macro level, you can see the relationship across all these different levels that affect schools. What's the relationship at a governance level, at a community level? What actually does it look like, such that we can then build the relationship that we want? So it's less just saying we have a common single thing that we're going to be working on, so let's go plan, do, study, act. No, here it's saying there's much more context and experience that has to be unpacked. And so in order to unpack all of those things, we've got to put together not just a single piece of information, but dashboards of information. We've got to make sure that we're looking at the right things, asking the right questions in order to engage in this work going forward. So now I will turn it over to Annie, who will take over this next piece, which is asking questions with dashboards.
Thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew talked about, dashboards are a great tool to use for continuous improvement. They really can help you align your definition of success across your stakeholders, from your parents and your teachers to your students and your board members. They can help you engage in conversations and help drive your decisions when thinking about your strategic plan and how to use your funds. Successful dashboards are going to help you communicate results in a user-friendly and clear format so everyone can understand where your school currently stands and trends over time. So when you're thinking about these dashboards and continuous improvement, where do you start? Well, the first thing you should do is determine your audience and purpose. So you can get overwhelmed and say, okay, I'm going to create a dashboard for the board and teachers and admissions and pastor. I recommend not doing that. Let's start with one place. What is your biggest goal? Where do you want to start? Begin with that. So you can decide that you really want to start with your board and informing them because they help you with decision making. And so if you're going to work with the board, you might update it quarterly. You might have information about enrollment, finance, and academics. If you decide you really need to focus on your finances, you might create a dashboard for your board's finance committee, as well as your business manager, your priest, your principal, and that will focus really on finance and fundraising. Maybe you decide instruction is where you're at and you want to focus on academic excellence. Well, then your dashboard will be for your teachers, and you might decide you want to look at it by grade or maybe by subject level and focus on achievement and growth, as well as maybe some attendance data and pass-fail. Maybe your enrollment's dipping, so you really want to focus on admissions. Well, then you'd want to look at enrollment metrics like inquiries, visits, open house attendance, retention rates, things like that. Or maybe you're working at the diocese level and you really want to look at how different schools compare to the overall averages. Well, then your dashboard would look more like the board and looking at enrollment, finances, academics, Catholic identity, things like that. So I just want to walk you through just to give you an idea and some examples of what your dashboard could look like when you're trying to decide what is your dashboard going to be. So this first one is a grade level dashboard. So it's for a 6th through 12th grade school, but it's for 6th grade. And so you'd have one of these for each grade. And you can see we have some different statistics about the 6th grade, you know, what services, if they're retained students or promoted, their gender. Then it looks at their GPA compared to the whole school. You can see the 6th grade has an 84, so it's doing better than the middle school and high school. Looking at some pass rates, looking at those fail rates by different backgrounds. So here, special ed and male students are failing, so how can we provide more service for them? As well as looking at by subject. So you can see math and science are where the students are failing the most, so what extra support can we do that? So again, it gives you a lot of information in one place, and its purpose is to show the 6th grade grade level teachers on what's going on. You might instead decide you want to focus on department level. So in this example, you know, it's reading 6th through 8th grade. So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade reading teachers might come together with the reading department head and look at how are their students doing. It shows you an average grade. It shows you the daily effort score, the homework score, tests, exams, and projects. And you can quickly see, because of the coloring, that the 8th grade's homework level is really low. So how can we work with them to improve their homework when their test is 86 average? We look at strengths and areas of improvement. So you can see by grade how they differently compare, and whose grade averages are less than 70. So again, how can we focus on that? And then it shows you students by grade group. So you can see 7th grade has the most students with high averages, 90 to 100 in purple. So what best practices from the 7th grade reading can we distribute to 6th and 8th to get them doing better? Here's a dashboard that we at the Archdiocese use with giving to parents. It doesn't compare the schools to anything except looking over time. It's just showing that the enrollment, some culture survey data, some achievement data, and some finance data. So showing how we're doing on these key metrics. Maybe you decided you really want to work on your marketing and trying to improve those statistics. So here you might have one on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram showing likes and follows and users and impressions. And we're using this little green arrow and red arrow to show how you're doing relative to last week, better or worse. So our page likes are down, but our users are up. So how can we next week increase keep our users engaged, but increase our page likes? Here's the finance dashboard. So this is a lot of data, and I wouldn't recommend this normally, but finance people love numbers, so that's why there are so many numbers. But down below, you can see here is really the metrics that are using that stoplight, green, yellow, red, which a lot of dashboards use and are a great tool, I would say, to begin with, is using those. So you can quickly see that the school overall has a green light and they have yellow on some things, so maybe that's where we focus on, and it has some graphs as well. Here's an enrollment dashboard that you might use if you want to focus on enrollment. You can see historical enrollments going down, breakdown by different populations. See the whole school as Black, African American. So maybe you decide you need to target different demographics to increase enrollment. Fundraising. Maybe you decide this year we're really working on our capital campaign and we need to increase fundraising. Then you'd want to create a dashboard around that. It might go along with that finance dashboard I showed before. And this one just shows you donations over time, as well as donations by source and your fundraising return on investment. You can see online donations are really high. So what best practices from those online donations, how do we get that so high? How can we extend that to some of our other sources? So that might be how it informs your decision. And then lastly, if you had an early childhood program, this might be something you show to the board, looking at revenue over time, where's the revenue coming from, and different enrollment, how it has changed over time for full-time and part-time early childhood. In California, they have dashboards for like every school, and they use gauges instead of that stoplight. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and they're looking at behavior, graduation rate, subjects, some culture surveys, data, whether it's standard met or not met. And then lastly, here's one that just in an Excel file, really, really simple. It lists the goal, the target, what happened 6 months ago, what's occurring now, and then it highlights it yellow, red, or green, so you can quickly see how you're doing on each goal. If you are overwhelmed by all those other dashboards, this might be where you want to start. Just in Excel, very simple, and just highlighting it yellow, red, or green. So I know those are a lot of different examples, but I just wanted to get your mind thinking about where can you start? Who is the audience? What is your school's goal when you're thinking about continuous improvement, and where you want to focus on first? So once you determine your audience and purpose, you really want to next think about your metrics. What are the metrics that align with the audience? So these are a few questions that I would ask you to write down things when you're thinking about creating your dashboard. What are your school's goals specific to the dashboard's audience regarding those NSBECS standards? Catholic identity, governance and leadership, academic excellence, and operational vitality. So if you decide your dashboard's audience is admissions, you probably are going to focus on metrics around operation vitality and those goals. If you have a goal that says, we want to increase the number of students with high scores on the high school placement exam, then you might have an academic excellence metric, but you probably wouldn't really have anything on governance and leadership. You'd be focusing on the operation vitality. If your dashboard audience is the board, then you probably have a metric from each of those, goal from each of those areas, because the board is focusing on all those things. Were there any other goals that you did not list from the first one that you frequently track or report to your dashboard's audience? So if your board is really concerned about suspension rates and you're reporting that at every meeting, that might be something you want to write down and something you want to consider on adding your dashboard. Now that you have that, what data do you measure these goals? How are you defining success? How are you collecting that data? So start thinking about that. And then how do you want to compare that data? And how are you defining success? It might be relative to a previous year, public schools, diocese, or state averages. So for example, if it's again enrollment, you don't really care what the average enrollment is throughout the whole entire state. That wouldn't be really helpful for your dashboard. But it would be helpful, how does your enrollment compare to last year or the year before? If you're looking at the percent proficient on the state exam in mathematics, you might want to compare that to the diocese, because that makes sense. We'll see how we are doing relative to the diocese. So once you decide on all those goals and write them down, next you want to think about your key performance indicators. So these are really the school drivers of success, and they define the success of those goals that you wrote down. They reflect progress of your intended outcomes, and they guide your priorities and decisions. You know, there's the old saying, what gets measured is what gets done. So these are the key performance indicators that you really want to follow and track. And the key word is key, because we want to limit a number to be a realistic amount that you can monitor. You don't want to have every single one I listed here, every single one I showed in those dashboards earlier. You want to pick a few that you can monitor. And just like in continuous improvement, where you're continuously looking at it, periodically reassessing it, just because you pick these key performance indicators today doesn't mean you need to use them in a year from now or 5 years from now. You can continually monitor and reassess them. So here's just some examples of key performance indicators, again, to get your creative juices flowing. We have academics, achievement and growth results, high school matriculation and graduation rate. Maybe you want to look at student behavior, suspension and attendance. For enrollment, you might want to look at inquiries to visits rate, applicants to enrolled rate, enrollment over time. If we're looking at finances, you might want to look at surplus or deficit, some fundraising. If one of your goals is to increase staff salaries, you might want to look at your staff salaries compared to the public school district salary to see how that compares. And then if you're trying to strengthen your Catholic identity, you might want to include the number of hours of community service that your stakeholders engage in, or something from your culture survey results. Those are just a few ideas. It's really important that you choose the correct key performance indicator, because different key performance indicators can tell different stories. So if we decide that we're doing a dashboard for admissions, and we decide our key performance indicator is enrollment by grade, this is the chart that I might have on my dashboard. So I would look at this, I'd be like, wow, we have 400 students, we have 2 to 3 sections per grade, we're doing great, this is awesome. But if instead I look at capacity, oh, wait, it's a different story. This school's only at 79% capacity. We've lost 65 students in 1 year. What is going on? So the graph above was giving me a different story than the bottom graph, and might inform our decisions differently. We might want to think about how should we instead market our school. If we're thinking about fundraising and we want to increase our fundraising, we won't want to show gross fundraising over time. And this graph is telling me, oh, we've increased fundraising by 7%, we're doing pretty good. But the key performance indicator that you actually want is your net fundraising. So in this graph, the blue is growth, orange is expense, growth minus expense equals net. So you can see over time, we actually only had $5,000 raised this year when you look at net. So this story is telling us really we need to think about our fundraising events and how can we decrease our expenses so we can increase our net fundraising. And then lastly, you want to be careful about how you compare your data and how you show it over time. So if we're looking at St. Sample, we might show, the board, well, we're 75% proficient in mathematics. We're doing awesome. But when we compare that to the diocese and national, we're actually lower than the diocese. We're doing above national. So you might think, okay, maybe we're still doing good. Maybe, we have different demographics or something. Why is that? I'm not exactly sure. But then when you look at it over time, the gray is national, the diocese is orange, St. Sample is blue. You can see the diocese and national have remained steady in the percent proficient in mathematics, while St. Sample has decreased by 11%. So now it's telling you, oh wait, 75% isn't good because we've decreased by 11% in the last 2 years. We need to focus on our mathematics instruction and see what's happened in the last 2 years. So again, you need to be very careful about which KPIs you choose and how you're showcasing it and comparing it and looking at over time, because it can tell you a different story. And this will take time. You might need to revise and change things, but just something to keep in the back of your mind. So once you decide on your metrics, the next thing you want to do is decide how you're going to visualize those KPIs that you've chosen. So hopefully you worked with a committee of a few people to decide on your KPIs, decide how you're going to compare them, what the goals are. And I would suggest just taking like a piece of paper and writing down how you want your dashboard to look like, because it's a lot easier to do that than to go into your tool, which I'll show you on the next page, some tools, and start there. It's a lot easier if it's on a piece of paper. So you can say, okay, I want a chart here, I want arrows, or I want stoplights, I want numbers, to start there with your committee. And then you need to make sure that you have the reliable and valid data that matches those metrics that you picked. You want to make sure that you have someone who is accountable for collecting it, and that there's a semi-automatic process, so it's not really hard to collect this data, so you can update the dashboard regularly. And I would recommend start simple and add on later. You want to focus on those key drivers and metrics. So even if you just decide you want to do a simple stoplight in Excel, this will make sure that you shift your attention to the most pressing issue and inform your decisions instead of focusing on how can I make it the prettiest dashboard ever and snazzy. Just start simple, and then you can add on later. So once you have that dashboard, you want to share it with your broader audience. So if you decided, okay, this dashboard is going to be for the board, you're going to share it with your entire board. You're going to ask them for feedback so you can revise it as necessary. And then you want to make sure you regularly update it. So when you create your dashboard, make sure that you decide how often you're going to update it. So if it's for the board, you want every single board meeting for it to be updated. If it's instead for your department chairs, then you want to update it maybe bi-weekly or once a month. So making sure you regularly update and commit to that updating is important. So what tools can you use? And I saw a question already about Tableau. So there's a few different tools that you can use. Tableau is great. It's $35 a month. So if you can afford it, that's awesome. Here's an example of an enrollment dashboard using Tableau. And what's great about it is you can create filters in it. And so I could go in here and change the gender to female and see, oh, how much females have applied or enrolled over time, where is their origin, as well as, you know, the race and ethnic group. So it can help you drill down. It's also great if you can give out a link to your Tableau to like every single board member. And so as soon as it's updated, they could go in and look at it compared to a PDF or an Excel file where there might be 5 different versions. It kind of gives you much more quick updated results using Tableau online. Microsoft Power BI, they have a free version as well as a $10 per month version, as well as like a pro version, which is a lot more expensive. Similar to Tableau, can give you much more updated information. This is an enrollment dashboard where you can see they have their goals and they're using yellow, red, green to showcase how they're doing, looking at enrollment over time and race and gender. And again, you can use this online, so you could go in online and check it. If you've never used a dashboard before, I would recommend starting in Excel. This financial dashboard is in Excel. You could just do those stoplights really easy, have your goals, be simple with a few little charts. And again, everyone has Excel, so it's free. That's why it's the best. It's the best one. Just want to make sure I didn't lose you by dropping that. Qualtrics is our favorite at our sites in Boston. It is a lot more expensive, but if you're getting a lot of your data through surveys, it can be really helpful. So this dashboard is looking at achievement and growth, as well as some teacher observations and comparing it from the school to the archdiocese. And then here's simple KPI. It's $100 per month, so the most expensive, but it has really snazzy widgets showing your key performance indicators. And when you Google like dashboard schools, there's so many different dashboard tools that you can use. But again, I recommend starting off with Excel if you've never done it before, and then maybe trying to go to Tableau once you get the hang of it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew.
Thank you, Annie. So I want to bring up a kind of a summative point based on some of the things that Annie and I have introduced today. And that is that continuous improvement is rooted fundamentally in the assumption that you can understand what your school needs to thrive, right? The experts in the field, people like me who say, here's what Catholic educational leadership needs to look like, or people outside of your school community might tell you, that there are common problems facing all schools. And here's a list of many of them, right? You know, governance models don't work, or there's a broken relationship in the governance model, or the leadership pipeline is broken, or enrollment's decreasing and we've got to figure a way to boost enrollment, or we've got to find a way to better market to our communities in order to let them know about the hidden gems that are Catholic schools. And all of these are systemic issues. These are systemic things that people deal with. However, continuous improvement cannot be rooted in just trying to solve those problems, because those problems might not be problems in your school community. And so the only way to actually engage in continuous improvement, to live up to this promise that the NSBECS have set for us, that we will be excellent because the church needs us to be excellent as Catholic schools, we've got to figure out, well, what's going to make us excellent, and what makes us excellent might look different. So we've got to figure out the metrics, as Annie was saying. We've got to figure out what the key performance indicators are. And then once we've got the key performance indicators, we have to spend the time interpreting them. One of the luxuries of Annie's role in her archdiocesan role is that she gets to figure out what things mean and why. She doesn't just collect the data, but she interprets them. She spends the time thinking about them. One of the privileges I have in my position is that I get to work with system leaders in Catholic schools, as well as Catholic school leaders that come in for coursework and that come in for workshops, so that we can take the time to do this. It is time consuming, but what we found again and again, Annie and her work at the Archdiocese, me and my work at BC, is that when you are willing and given the space to take that time to figure out what we're actually trying to do, you can put together a collection of information, which for our purposes, we're calling a dashboard, which shows solid, reliable data rooted in the things that matter to you and the issues that are coming up in your setting, right? It's about diagnosing first, what do we actually have here? So the diagnosis part is crucial, just kind of, it's almost like doing a descriptive review of a student. For those who are familiar with descriptive reviews, what actually is going on? What is the surface reality? And then once we've figured out that context, analyze that experience, to bring back in the Jesuit language, then we can get into the reflection piece that allows us to say, where do we want to go? So we collect the information rooted in the things that we want to do, we reflect on it, we think about where we want to go, and then we can get to the action thing. There's this kind of a mantra that a lot of educational change experts say, that we can be data driven to distraction. We can allow the data to tell us where to go. We can take the problems as defined by system leaders about governance or leadership pipeline issues or enrollment issues, and just try to fix those things in our setting. But that might not be the thing that is actually driving either a lack of operational vitality or a lack of academic success. And I think Annie provided you a lot of different examples of figuring out where to start with how to diagnose those problems, and then to get to the prognosis section, because it's only after adequate and careful and intentional diagnosis you can actually get to prognosis. And you might not be right? We have to work together, because we might not be right. We might not have all of the right answers. But ultimately, if we spend the careful time in the diagnosis, getting the right metrics, the right key performance indicators, then we can get to prognosis, where continuous improvement actually lives. And that will ultimately make us sustainable in the long term as Catholic schools. So I think the argument that we're trying to push forward today is that continuous improvement is hard, and you're already doing a lot of this work. What it takes is careful and intentional time to step back, figure out how you're going to make the case about what is most necessary in your school, and to find the right things, the right pieces of data that are going to help you make that case, and then putting that information together in a usable, readable dashboard of some sort. It's not necessarily go do what everyone's telling you to do. It's figure out what is necessary for your context based on your experiences, reflect carefully on it, and then make the case about what needs to happen next. So that, I hope, summarizes as best as we possibly can this topic on how to use dashboards for continuous improvement. You see our contact information there. And now I think Thomas will facilitate questions.
Unmute myself there. So just as a reminder, we have a Q&A button at the bottom. Please feel free to put your questions in there, and we will read them out loud and try to answer as many as we can in the time that we have. So I have one here. It's kind of a long one. It says, what are the chances that we'll see an NCAA data warehouse with pre-selected KPIs in line with NSBECS recommended for different schools in different areas with different governance models? There aren't many Annies out there, and on the school level, maybe even diocesan level, it can be hard to justify the hire.
I mean, we can tell Kathy mirrors about that, but I mean, I don't work for NCA, so I don't know if you want to take that, Thomas.
Sure. I don't know too much about it, but I do know that our interim president, Kathy, who she's very interested in data. So I don't know what that looks like going forward, but that is something that we can certainly share with her. And I'm sure she'd be interested in that because she loves data. So yeah. All right.
And I'll interject too that you might not have a Catholic college or university that has a focus on Catholic schools nearby geographically, but NCEA in coordination with the Catholic Higher Education Supporting Catholic Schools group, you can find the CHE SCS link on the NCEA website. And there's all sorts of contact information for those of us who are in Catholic higher ed supporting Catholic schools. So if you don't have the capacity in your school or diocese, I would wager that there's going to be a Catholic higher education institution, if not geographically close, then at least digitally close to you, where you can reach out, find somebody who can help you process these questions, because having critical thought partners is going to be essential if you don't have the capacity yourself. So you can go to the CHESCS link on the NCEA website and look at all the different centers for Catholic ed and programs in Catholic ed that the Catholic higher education institutions have. And we're waiting to work with you and partner with you in this work if you know that you don't have the capacity yourself.
And I want to add that I feel like our boards are underutilized. And so if you don't have someone, there might be someone on your board who is data savvy or, wants to give back more. And so you could ask someone on your board to kind of lead this effort around wherever you want to start with your dashboard, and give them the resources to do it.
All right, thank you for that. Don't actually have any more questions. I'm going to wait a few more seconds to see if anyone else has a question to put into the Q&A box. I believe you answered two of the other questions that we had already in discussing Tableau and other assets, as well as defining dashboard in the context of today. So we'll wait just a few more seconds, see if anything else pops up. And if not, do you have any parting words for us today?
Feel free to reach out to us. You have our email. And
Please
good luck
do.
with everything. I know things are crazy.
Yes, we at BC have been doing a lot of thinking about how best to support Catholic schools, and one of the first places we reached out to was our local partners in Archdiocese of Boston and Diocese of Fall River and other places, knowing that you need our support right now. So please know that we're here for you.
All right, and before we get off of here, I am just going to put down into the chat box for everyone. Please evaluate the session, get your certificate of attendance when you do that. The link is down there. You can copy and paste that bit.ly link into your browser and give some great feedback on this session for both Andrew and Annie. Thank you both for being here and sharing this very interesting topic. Are we able to maybe share your slides with, okay. So we'll see about putting that on our NCA website, or you obviously have the contact information there if people are looking for that from you. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.